Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So today I want to talk about this situation involving Umar Johnson. So I want to give people some time to join this Google Hangout. So I'm going to wait before I get into the main subject of this video. I'll just start off by just talking about some random stuff. Peace, Queen's sister, shout out to you. Peace, Elaine Lloyd, shout out to you. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to get started in a few minutes. I just, before I get started, I just want to talk about some random stuff. Shout out to Ann X. I see you there. Peace and blessings to you. I don't know how many of you have seen that Star Wars movie, the latest Star Wars movie. I think it's titled The Last Jedi. I just got back from watching that with my daughter. I may do a review on that movie later on, just talking about it and sharing my thoughts about it. But for any of those, I want to know if anybody in the chat room has seen the movie The Last Jedi. I don't think so, just based on who's here. I don't know if y'all are into sci-fi or anything like that. Shout out to Dolly. Peace and blessings to you. So I see that we have a few people. So I might as well get started. But before I do, I again may do a live Google Hangout or a video talking about The Last Jedi, just doing a brief review of that. Shout out to Prolific Buyers. He had a question about that movie. I don't want to get too sidetracked. That was just to get things warmed up before I get started into the main subject. I'm going to do a separate video on Star Wars. Hopefully I'll be able to do that tonight. So let's talk about this. I'm going to share my screen so that you all can see what I'm referring to. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so just to get started, this morning I was watching Lennon Arner's video. He has this whole series on these conscious internet-based leaders, and he's basically calling out a lot of these people as being frauds and con men and hustlers and stuff like that. And again, as I have been saying in prior videos, I encourage you all to check out Lennon Arner's channel and watch a lot of those videos. That whole series is very thought-provoking. And not only does he talk about these pro-black leaders, he also talks about these conspiracy theorists and all that kind of stuff, how a lot of them are con artists, a lot of them are frauds and hustlers, manipulating people in order to get money. So it's a very informative series. So I encourage you to check that out again. And also, a lot of the information that he has is based on his personal interactions with some of these people. But this morning I was listening to his latest installment, and he mentioned this whole situation involving Umar Johnson, which I was not aware of. So right after I heard about it, I went onto Facebook and I went to Umar Johnson's page and I checked out what he had to say. And then later on, I saw this article right here on The Root talking about this situation. So I'm going to lay out just the basic facts of what's going on with Umar Johnson right now. And then I'm going to provide my assessment of the situation and my thoughts about it. And just some general thoughts about these so-called black conscious leaders on YouTube and elsewhere who represent themselves as if they are black leaders in the black community. So here's the situation. Umar Johnson is under investigation. He recently received a letter or a notice. Actually, it's a notice of hearing. It's a notice sent by the Department, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of State, the State Board of Psychology, and there's a hearing date that's set for, I believe, is January 8th. And basically, his license is on the line. So there's supposed to be this hearing. and he doesn't spell out why they are conducting this hearing. One thing that he suggests is that this hearing was set because a lot of people have been complaining, and that's the only reason why there's a hearing. That's the only reason why his license is in jeopardy. And he issued this statement on his social media. And I'm not sure, this looks like Instagram. It may be from his Instagram page that they have posted here on the root. But on here, he talks about how sometimes he asks himself, why did he start this campaign? He talked about how he's ready to return all the donations and move to Africa. Also, he talked about how a lot of countless coons have constantly harassed white people in the power structure until they have decided to strip him of his credentials and arrest his fund and audit him. He complained about hundreds of calls to institutions asking about his credentials and all this kind of stuff. And he talks about like how all these people have basically betrayed him, and then he highlights the fact that even his father has betrayed him. That's what he asserts. And I want to let you all know that Umar Johnson's father has his own YouTube page, and on that page, he denies that he was a part of any of this. You know, he talks about how despite his ideological type of differences with his son, he doesn't personally attack his son. He would never do anything like this to his son. So he denies those allegations. And Umar Johnson also goes on to say that he's going on some kind of farewell tour. And basically he's going to take a break from social media, and he's going to take farewell from the so-called conscious community. And he said that he's going to keep pushing for his school. And that's how he ends that post. And yeah, this is Instagram. And then also he talks about how, you know, he complains about the crab in the barrel mentality as well. He talks about people trying to pull him down, and he calls people ridiculous ingrates and stuff, as pointed out in this Root article. And then this article also points out how he received this notice right here from GoFundMe, basically saying that they have not received a response to their last message to him. And he said, please, and the letter says, please address the following within 48 hours to avoid removal of your account. And it goes on to say, please know that this isn't an attack on you, but to make sure that the funds raised on GoFundMe are used in line with the purpose of your campaign. And that's something that's very serious, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later. And also it says, additionally, our team is here to work with you to prove the validity of your campaign, and your cooperation is appreciated. It goes on to say, please note that GoFundMe may request evidence from you if we feel that it is needed to ensure that your campaign is in line with our terms. And then it goes on to say that he can read more elsewhere. So in addition to that, like in addition to him issuing that statement about that notice of hearing, he also has posted a lot of things on social media trying to equate himself to various freedom fighters, you know, using the image of Rosa Parks, for instance. And I'm going to go to his page right now. So he has this image of Marcus Garvey, you know, basically trying to equate himself to Marcus Garvey. He has other images on here as well on his social media. Let me just go back where he has like, just bear with me a second. I was looking at his social media and he had images of Martin Luther King as well. Let me try to see if I can find it on his Facebook page. Yeah, so he has all these images here. You know, these different images, Rosa Parks, as I mentioned earlier, Martin Luther King, and one of the Soledad brothers, etc. And this is his page right here. And then he has Harriet Tubman saying no retreat, no surrender. So he's using a lot of propaganda to hype people up and to equate what he's going through to the struggles of freedom fighters and all that kind of stuff. And so I just want to get into this. I want to talk about this right now. So you all have the basic information that's been laid out. So let me stop sharing my screen. Just bear with me a second, y'all. Okay, so before I get into what I have to say, I'm going to look at your comments and see what you all are saying. Okay, and Prolific Buyer says LA brought up a good point. This wouldn't be an issue if the conscious stripper situation never occurred. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. You know, as I do my analysis, I'm going to deal with the conscious stripper issue and other issues involving Umar Johnson. Also, you're saying that this wouldn't have been brought up if he didn't take his particular stance on gay people and stuff. And I see someone said this is the year of folks getting their just desserts. And I see someone here says, if you haven't done half of what Umar Johnson has done for the community, then what you say means nothing. Okay, and somebody said, what's his dad's YouTube name? His channel is, let me just pull up his name is Jamal Johnson, but I'm going to pull up the actual, I'm going to go through my history and pull up his, the exact name of his channel. Just bear with me a second. And also I'll post it in the description box once this video uploads. But his father's name is Jamal Johnson. The video that I reference is entitled Dr. Umar's Dad Appeals to Dr. Umar. So you all could check that out for yourself, where he's responding to Umar Johnson. Because Umar Johnson put it out here on social media that his own father conspired against him. So his father decided to respond to those allegations, because that there are a lot of people that blindly support Umar Johnson. Anything he says, people take it as the gospel truth. They don't even question it. A lot of times they don't even do their own analysis or critical thinking about what he says. They just run with what he says. And so his father felt the need to defend himself, and he did a video. Again, I'll post a link in the description box once this video uploads. And in terms of, I'll just respond to this real quick. In terms of, people saying, well, what you mean says nothing. Like if somebody has criticism of Dr. Umar Johnson, if they're not doing half what he's doing, and they can't criticize him, or what they say has no merit. I think that that's a way to silence people. It's a way to avoid accountability. If someone is in a position of leadership, then they should not have any problem being held accountable. And we need to hold all leaders accountable, whether these are elected officials, whether these are people that are heads of organizations, regardless of who they are. If they are taking a position of leadership, if they're in a position where public trust is involved, where people are looking to them as an example, as a role model, or somebody to lead them somewhere, then the people have every right to question that leader and to hold that leader accountable, regardless of what kind of work that individual is doing in the community. And I think that real leadership doesn't mind constructive criticism. Real leadership doesn't have any problem with transparency. Real leadership doesn't have any problem with being held accountable for what they do. So I'm going to continue going through the comments before I go on to my commentary. And I see this. Elaine Lloyd said that I don't know. I don't follow him. I thought that you could have a GoFundMe for anything. People do it for rent. But I think that there are terms, like I don't have a GoFundMe, so I'm not familiar with the terms. But, one of the things that I would think is common sense is that if it's, if someone puts it out there that they are raising money for a school, then that fund has to be used to raise money for a school. People can't make misrepresentations about the purpose of their GoFundMe account. They can't deceive people or engage in fraudulent type of activity. So those types of things may be violations of the rules of the GoFundMe website, and that may be a reason why people are raising suspicions. It may be a reason why GoFundMe has sent a notice to Umar Johnson. And so I'm going to go into some of those points a little bit later about the GoFundMe and Umar Johnson's response to that issue, because I find it odd. I find his response to be a little bit peculiar, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in this live stream. And X said nobody is attacking Umar, just talking about what's going on with Umar. And for some people, that's true. Like, some people are not attacking him. Like, for me, I'm not necessarily attacking him in this video. I'm just laying out the allegations and talking about other things with respect to Umar Johnson. Okay, and I see that someone says that before this becomes an attack, this investigation won't go anywhere. They're just addressing it because people are complaining. And yeah, we don't know what's going to happen with the investigation. We really don't. And at least from my point of view, I'm going to withhold judgment until there's an actual decision in this particular case or matter. At that time, the facts will be clear. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to prejudge what's going to happen here until, after the hearing and after all the evidence has been presented. Then I'll probably do a follow-up video on this subject. But, this raises serious concerns, even though, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know, we don't even know what the real allegations are at this point. All we know is that there's a hearing set for January that may involve Umar Johnson's license being removed. That's all we know at this point. We don't know anything about the allegations. Okay, and I see someone here is talking about him taking teenagers on a trip for the summer. Yeah, a lot of these things I'm going to address in my commentary. Taking people to Africa in the summer, and that's good. I mean, it's good to take somebody to Africa or young people to Africa, but that does not mean that because somebody does things like that, that all of a sudden people can't analyze them, people can't hold them accountable, people can't question them. Like, regardless of who somebody is, we have to be in a position where we can hold these people accountable. Okay, I see a lot of people are getting into a lot of the points that I wanted to raise. So I'm just going to go into my analysis, and then, I'll get back to the comments in the chat room. But, the first thing I'll say is I touched on this a couple of minutes ago, and that's this. As far as this hearing is concerned, I'm not going to prejudge the situation. I'm not going to say, well, he's definitely guilty of this and that, and his license should be revoked. Because right now, again, we don't even know what the allegations are. We don't even know why they are setting this hearing. We know nothing except for that there is a hearing. So, At this point, I'm going to wait for the results to come out, wait for, what happens, what kind of decision is reached in the particular case or matter. After the parties have a chance to present testimony and evidence and all that kind of stuff, then we'll be in a better position to analyze the situation and to judge the situation. But for right now, it's premature to do so. But I will say a couple of things about this. Even though I'm not going to prejudge the situation, and I'm going to go back to sharing my screen so you all can see some things. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so one thing that struck me as odd is the fact that it seems like he's basically given up. He's talking about how he's going to take a break from social media. He's going to say farewell to the so-called Black conscious community. That strikes me as odd. If I was in this situation where I knew that somebody was presenting false claims or weak claims or frivolous claims and all that kind of stuff, the last thing I would be talking about was surrender. The last thing I would be talking about is saying farewell to the conscious community. The last thing I would be talking about is returning funds that I plan to use for a school. That would be the last thing I would be talking about. What I would be doing is talking about how these claims are frivolous and how I'm going to wage a strong defense to these ridiculous claims. I would have my lawyer up front, making statements on my behalf, outlining and explaining like how frivolous and ridiculous the particular allegations are. But the fact that he is taking this posture where he's basically saying that he's thinking about returning the donations, he's thinking about moving to Africa, he's thinking about saying farewell to the conscious community, for me, that raises a red flag. And then, just his approach to this, like how he's trying to basically, let me go back. And his whole approach to the situation is suspect as well. Like, even though I'm not going to prejudge the situation, his approach to it is suspect. And I'm going to tell you why it's suspect, because one thing that was pointed out in this article on The Root, they talked about how just filing a complaint against, people having complaints against someone is not the grounds for someone to be taken, have their license removed. Just because people complain, that's not a grounds to have somebody's license revoked and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to show you the actual language that the rule refers to when they explain the grounds for having someone's license removed. Let me share my screen again real quick. Okay, so here's some excerpts from the Board of Psychology's booklet that has the grounds for refusal or suspension or revocation of license, and it outlines these are some of the reasons why somebody can have their license removed. Failure to demonstrate qualifications or standards for license, that's one ground. Making misleading, deceptive, untrue, or fraudulent representations in the practice of psychology. Practicing fraud or deceit in obtaining a license to practice psychology. Displaying gross incompetence, negligence, or misconduct in carrying on the practice of psychology. Submitting a false or deceptive registration to the board, being convicted of a felony in any state or federal court, or being convicted of the equivalence of a felony in any foreign country, having a license to practice psychology suspended, revoked, or refused, or receiving other disciplinary action by the proper psychology licensing authority of another state, territory, or country, Also, being unable to practice psychology for, being unable to practice psychology with reasonable skill and safety by reason of illness, drunkenness, excessive use of drugs, narcotics, chemicals, or any type of material, or as a result of any mental or physical condition. Also, it goes on to say violating a lawful regulation promulgated by the board, including ethical regulations. It goes on to say knowingly aiding, assisting, procuring, or advising any unlicensed person to practice psychology. It goes on to say committing immoral or unprofessional conduct, soliciting any engagement to perform professional services by any direct, in-person, or uninvited soliciting through use of coercion, duress, compulsion, intimidation, threats, overreaching, or harassing conduct. And then, here are the last couple of reasons. Failing to perform any statutory obligation placed upon a licensed psychologist, intentionally submitting to a third-party payer a claim for services or treatment which was not actually provided to a client, failing to maintain professional records in accordance with regulations prescribed by the board. So those are the reasons why somebody can have their license suspended or revoked. So the claim that his license may be revoked simply because people made blanket complaints, that's not a strong claim. It has to be much more than that. His license will not be revoked simply because somebody complained. There has to be evidence justifying a revocation of his license. So, that's one thing. And then, I want to address a couple of other points before I get back to your comments. Just bear with me a second. And that's, the points of this. I've seen a couple of videos where people have called people coons for, raising questions about Umar Johnson. They have called people crabs in a barrel for simply asking questions, for simply talking about this case, or for simply raising issues, raising questions like about the funds for the school and all that kind of stuff. For that, people are called coons. For that, people are attacked and all that kind of stuff. When it goes back to the point that I raised earlier, every person needs to be held accountable. Every leader needs to be held accountable. There must be transparency. So if somebody is raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, people have every right to ask what is being done with those funds. Where are those funds? What is your plan for these funds? Like if someone is saying, well, they're going to open up a school and they've been raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for years. It's been at least 2 or 3 years that Umar Johnson has been raising these funds for this school. And, people have every right to ask, where are those funds? Have you spent those funds? What are you doing with those funds? And anybody that's transparent, anybody that's honest would have no problem like pointing out how much dollars are left, where are the funds being held, when do you plan to purchase the school? Like those basic questions, somebody shouldn't have any problem answering those kinds of questions, especially to people that are investing their money into your program. Working class people, struggling people putting their dimes and their dollars together to help you realize a dream. They have every right to ask about those funds. Every right. And instead of responding with arrogance, instead of responding with narcissism. You got to be humble. You know, you got to be a humble servant to the people. If you are a true leader to the people, you have to, humility is a number one characteristic of a true leader. A true leader realizes that they are a servant of the people, not vice versa. The people are not there to serve the leader. They're not there to make the leader feel good and make the leader feel comfortable. So that's a legitimate question. What happened to the funds? Where are the funds and all that kind of stuff? And the thing this raising serious questions is this GoFundMe. Here you have GoFundMe issuing a notice to Umar Johnson saying, well, if you don't respond within 48 hours, we're going to take action. And instead of talking about his response, instead of issuing a response and making that publicly available, this guy is talking about returning funds. Why is he talking about returning funds? Why is that? Instead of why hasn't he responded to GoFundMe? That's what I want to know. And that shouldn't be a difficult question to answer. I mean, if someone is using the funds as they have said that they would use them, you know, for the purposes that they said they were going to use the funds, then they shouldn't have any problem presenting evidence to GoFundMe explaining how they are in compliance with GoFundMe's policy. And when somebody raises this, you know, it is not legitimate to try to shut them down by calling them names and labeling them and stuff like that. That is just a tactic to deflect from the question at hand. That is just a way to personally attack the person instead of responding to the actual question being raised. So, yeah, I mean, so it's serious. And then, like, you know, so there are questions with credibility as well. And some of those things I mentioned before, like, you know, this whole thing about the saying that he's going to have his license removed simply because people complain when, you know, I just explained all the reasons why somebody's license can be suspended, and a mere complaint without any basis is not a reason for somebody's license to be suspended. And then this is not the first time. And then he says that his father was behind this. His father denies that. So that raises issues of credibility. That raises issues of somebody's trustworthiness, of their truthfulness, and all that. And it's not the first time that these questions of truthfulness have been raised with respect to Umar Johnson. I mean, another prime example is him telling somebody, like he was on some program, you know, if I'm not mistaken, it was either what's his name, the News One with Roland Martin. He was either on that or on this other program. I can't remember the guy's name. I think his name is Newman, something like that. And he was asked about like if he's in any relationships and all that, and he was talking about how he's celibate. You know, that's what he said. You know, he's celibate. He's not in any kind of relationships. And it turns out that this guy was with a stripper. You know, so, I mean, we can take aside, you know, put aside the issue of, you know, him being with a stripper and just deal with the issue of honesty and integrity. I mean, like, why would you lie about something basic like that? Making misrepresentations about your lifestyle, presenting a false image of how you are actually living. So when people lie about things like that, I mean, it makes you question their sincerity. It makes you question everything about them. And not only that, I mean, it goes into hypocrisy as well. I mean, here you have somebody that's preaching about, like, you know, being dedicated to black women, treating black women with respect and all that kind of stuff, talking about raising healthy children and all that kind of stuff. But yet he's engaged in a lifestyle that is contrary to all that rhetoric about the black family and about taking care of black women and providing for black women. And people have every right to call out this BS, man. And what has happened is, in the conscious community, a lot of these leaders, they have become like some of these corrupt pastors in these churches. And people blindly follow these leaders just like they blindly follow corrupt pastors in church. These pastors that are asking you to give over your money so that they can live in a mansion, so that they can drive a fancy car, so that they can buy jets. while you're struggling to pay for your bare necessities. And I'm not saying that Umar Johnson is living like that, but I mean, if you're talking about like, rebuilding a family and yet you're not engaged in that kind of lifestyle, I mean, it's hypocrisy. If you're talking about, you need money for a school and all that kind of stuff, and nobody knows where the funds are, nobody knows how much money is left, nobody has any kind of clear signs that you have actually made steps to make this a reality, that raises serious questions, man. And, we have to get beyond like hero worship and start to think with our, use critical thinking and, analysis, and hold leaders accountable for what they say and for what they do. Otherwise, we'll continue to have these Eddie Long type of characters. We'll continue to have these Creflo Dollars. We'll continue to have not only these pimping pastors, we'll have these hustling con artists masquerading as pro-Black leaders in our community. So, and then, someone mentioned that Umar Johnson has done a lot for the community, and I just want to talk about that briefly. Someone mentioned that he took kids to Africa, and that's great and all that kind of stuff. I don't knock that or anything like that, and I don't have a problem with that. But when you look in terms of actually fighting against racism in society, fighting against police brutality, fighting against various forms of discrimination in terms of mass incarceration, police brutality and racial profiling and all that kind of stuff, what has Umar Johnson actually done besides give speeches, besides go on a lecturing tour? I mean, a lot of these people are entertainers. They're not organizing any kind of protest against injustice. I mean, a lot of times, the only thing that they're organizing is their speaking tour, and they're focused on getting booked and getting dollars so that they could maintain a certain lifestyle. They're not involved in grassroots organizing. And, really, I question whether or not these people are actually real leaders. So those are just some of my thoughts about this situation. I'll stay tuned on this situation. I will keep people informed as things happen. I'm going to follow the case and the matter to find out what happens with this hearing. So I look forward to finding out what's going to happen with this hearing. And I don't know what the allegations are. I don't know if they're true or false or anything like that. And we'll find out, after all the parties had an opportunity to present their witnesses and their evidence and all that kind of stuff, then we'll be in a position to know what actually happened. Then we'll be in a position to actually judge whether or not Umar did something wrong or right or whatever. So until then, I won't pass judgment on that. And frankly, I don't wish any harm on anybody. I don't want to see somebody lose their license or lose their livelihood or anything like that. But I also don't want to see somebody conning people in the name of pro-Blackness or Pan-Africanism, or in the name of setting up some school that never is going to become a reality. I don't want to see people get swindled out of their money. And I'm not saying that that's the case here, but I don't want to see that happen to people. I don't want to see people put their energy and their time and their money into something that's a sham. And right now, we don't know if that's what this is even about. We don't even know if this school is going to be built or anything like that. And hopefully, I would hope that these allegations are false, and, that he can continue, living his life and all that kind of stuff. But if these allegations are true, man, it's time for us to do some serious self-reflection. It's time for us to decide on how are we going to judge leaders in the future. Like, how are we going to decide who will be our leaders? Because too often what we do is we go along with whoever has the most charisma, whoever is a great speaker and stuff like that, instead of looking to tangible, measurable accomplishments that they have in terms of improving the lives of Black people as a collective. That's what we need to look for. We need to look for measurable signs that they have demonstrated something, that they have demonstrated their qualifications to lead. So, those are my thoughts. And so right now, what I'm going to do is go through your comments and respond to your comments. And, so if y'all have questions about anything that I said, feel free to leave those questions in the chat room. But I'm going to go through the comments now. And also, I saw that somebody mentioned Donald Trump. And, there were a couple of things that like raised my suspicions with a lot of these people. Like when a lot of people were, a lot of these so-called leaders were encouraging black people not to vote, even though we faced the prospect of having a right-wing white supremacist sympathizer in the White House. People were still advising black people that the vote doesn't count, it's not important, and all that kind of stuff. That made me question these people's sincerity. It made me question their commitment to black people. So that's one thing that made me question people. People like Umar Johnson, and then also, these other issues that I raised, the stripper controversy, and then also that whole thing that blew up last year with him and that guy, what's that, Sarah Susan Seti and all that kind of stuff, like just how he behaved, like he tries to present this standard for how black people should be, and then he's behaving like your typical street thug. And for those of you who haven't seen my commentary on that, when I get a chance, I'll post a link in the card so that you can check that out. But let me go through these comments real quick before I close out. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. For those people who missed it, Dr. Umar Johnson's father has a YouTube channel. The name of the channel is Jamal Johnson. Again, I'll post a link in the description box so that you can watch it. He responds to Umar Johnson because, again, Umar Johnson basically said that his father betrayed him and all these other people betrayed him. And he was kind of like trying to imply that his father had something to do with these allegations against him, with this, he had something to do with this complaint being filed against him and, jeopardizing his license. Shout out to Yvonne Robinson. Good evening to you. And Miss J said this. She said, I don't have a problem with Umar Johnson because it's obvious what he's doing, and the folks who believe him deserve what happens. Wow. Yeah, I get that to a certain degree, man, because at a certain point, you have to hold yourself accountable as well. But my whole thing is like, why is it taking them so long to set up this school? I mean, there are people who have set up schools with far less money. Like in the Washington, D.C. area, they have a long-time African-centered school that's a private school that's been set up for decades now. There are plenty of charter schools and all that kind of stuff, and I understand his rhetoric about not wanting to have any kind of public schools having any kind of influence over his curriculum and all this and that. But he could have set up a private school, a less extravagant one than he imagines. Some kind of school. He could have had some kind of school at least. And, it just raises questions. I mean, when you go year after year of promoting the school and you still don't have a school, you talk about all these tours that you've been on to see this site and that site and still don't have a school. And people see you traveling around and nobody knows how much money is in the account or how it's being used. And then you have GoFundMe issuing you a notice talking about if you don't respond, your thing will be removed. That raises serious questions. So just bear with me as I go through your comments. I see Miss J said Umar Johnson does a service, which is give black people hope and entertainment. If you expect more after all this time, you need your head checked. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hear you. But I don't know about giving people hope. I don't know if he actually does that, man. You know, I mean, when I listen to him and others speak, you know, it gives you a sense of pessimism, man. You know, they tell you how, you know, you can't affect change through the system and this and that. So I don't hear much optimism when I listen to Umar Johnson, even though I understand a lot of his points. But hope and optimism are like some of the last things that I think about when I think about the speeches that I've heard of his. You know, I hear more pessimism. You know, I hear, you know, righteous indignation and all that kind of stuff. But I don't hear hope when I listen to his speeches. And I see that Elaine Lloyd said all black activists. She said all black activists don't do all the right, you know, all the things right. You know, she said that Umar Johnson doesn't like light skin or albino people, though they are black. And he has made some disparaging comments about lighter skinned African Americans, like when he was involved in that dispute with Sarah and Susan Seti. You know, he did make some disparaging remarks about him being lighter skinned and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, the bottom line is we're all black people, you know, regardless of our different complexions. And we need to learn how to love and respect each other, especially somebody who professes to be a Pan-Africanist, you know, knowing that black people come in a wide range of complexions and all that kind of stuff. Um, but he has heard, like, to his credit, he has said things in favor of biracial people and stuff like that, contrary to what some of these other so-called pro-black people say that, you know, want to alienate biracial people and, you know, discard them and all that kind of stuff. So to his credit, he does, you know, embrace biracial people, but he does have this issue with colorism, you know. And again, an example of that was his conflict with that Hotep guy that I mentioned earlier. Now, Yvonne Robinson said that Umar Johnson is not a doctor; he's a liar, and I've heard that a lot. And but a while ago, like a couple of months ago, the Root put out an article where they were questioning whether or not he had a doctorate, and then later they did a retraction because they were able to find out that he did in fact have a doctorate, at least according to that article. So that's a question that may have been resolved, but we'll see. We don't even know what this hearing is about. Maybe that's one of the questions being raised in that hearing. So we have to check that out. Okay, I see that. Yeah, I don't want to mispronounce your name, but someone has said that he has posted publicly the bank where the GoFundMe funds go. He hasn't taken anything out of the account. The bank stated that nothing has been taken out of the account. Well, the question I have for you is, like, if that's the case, why is GoFundMe threatening to remove his account? If that's the case, if there's no funny business going on with his account or his fundraising efforts, why is GoFundMe threatening him? And why hasn't he responded to GoFundMe's letters and notices? That's the question I have for you. Yeah, I see Von Robinson said that this YouTuber Anti Afro is the go-to for all things dealing with Umar Johnson. And I've just recently started to check out her channel because that was one of the channels that Lennon Arner mentioned. He mentioned the work that she was doing in analyzing Umar Johnson. And I just recently started to check out her videos. Um, yeah, and I'm not too familiar with her channel. I just saw like one, you know, I started watching one of her videos. So I can't vouch for her channel yet. After I check it out, maybe then I could take a position on it. But one thing that I find odd about her channel is the fact that she's fixated on one person. Like, I just wonder, like, why is she so obsessed with Umar Johnson? Like, I mean, this woman has dedicated her life, basically her YouTube life at least, to trying to take down Umar Johnson. And I just wonder why is she so motivated? Why is she so animated with animosity towards this man? I mean, I understand people raising legitimate questions, but I want to know more about her story. So if you know that, the reason why she's so motivated, I would appreciate you let me know. If you let me know, Yvonne, in the chat room, I would appreciate that. Yeah, I see one of the people in the chat room is asking if he wasn't a doctor, why would his credentials be investigated? And that was one of the things that I mentioned when I was talking about the possible reasons for them to have this hearing. They mentioned the possibility of somebody presenting false credentials and all that kind of stuff, if I'm not mistaken, in that list. So that may possibly be a reason for this hearing, but we don't know again. And I see Covina Man said, wow, I never really liked Dr. Umar, but I didn't think he was a fraud. Yeah. And I haven't said whether or not I think he's a fraud or anything like that. I don't know. We'll see what happens with this hearing. I think that, that'll be a chance for us to know what's really going on with Dr. Umar. And, the fact that he's talking about like chilling and, not continuing what he does, like he's talking about saying farewell. Again, that makes me just wonder, like, how serious are these charges against him and what kind of evidence do they have? I see someone said that Umar Johnson's dad is young. Yeah, he does look kind of young. I don't know how old he is, but he does look kind of young. And I see Ron Hall says that anti-Afro is a bigger threat than Umar could ever be. And I wonder why you say that. So if you could respond in the chat room, I would appreciate it. And I see Vaughn Robinson said, when did Black people start not being able to spot frauds, cons, swindlers, and thieves? Yeah, I think that often we're in denial. Like, just like those people that supported Eddie Long, people are just in denial. Like they refuse to see reality. Like, you could have a Creflo Dollar, a man who's a millionaire, living it up, begging his poor congregation, his middle class congregation, working class congregation, to help him buy a jet that costs millions of dollars. But yet people will continue to follow him. They continue to follow people, like even that white pastor, Joel Osteen, like, who refused to open the doors of his church during that hurricane in Texas. He had a chance to help people, and the only time he decided to open his doors is when a lot of people criticized him. These are people that claim to be following the gospel of Jesus, claim to be following Jesus' example, and yet a lot of these people are hustlers and pimps, basically pimping their congregation, not being generous the way Jesus was generous, peace be upon him. So yeah, people are able to spot them, but often people refuse to to acknowledge the reality when they see it happening in front of their very eyes. Because again, people are caught up with charisma, they're caught up with being entertained by somebody's speaking ability or the power of their personality. And, often it's not about like the substance necessarily. It's not necessarily about like what kind of results these people are producing. It's all about the personality. It's all about the charming nature of a person and the compelling nature of their speech that people get caught up into. And I see that this person says that I didn't agree with the stripper issue and him lying about being celibate, but other than that, he's had my support 100%. Yeah, I mean, I wonder if your position will change after this hearing, after evidence comes out and all that kind of stuff. And my whole thing is like, if somebody will lie about something basic and simple as that, about their lifestyle, what else are they lying about? And Prolific Buyer says this. He says, I wonder why no professional athletes, entertainers, etc., got behind him. Rose got his school up and going in Detroit way quicker and is thriving every year. And also, LeBron James has set up a school. Like, he's established a school as well. And I know that these people have millions of dollars. They have a lot of money at their disposal, so it's much easier for them to get things done and all that kind of stuff. But the point about entertainers giving him money, that's a valid point, because they could have given him the money that he needed to set up the school if he's sincere. Like, why aren't they supporting his cause? That's a good question. And it may go down to like some of the things that he talks about. Like, a lot of people don't feel comfortable supporting those types of things. Some people may be turned off by that whole stripper controversy, or the way he reacted to Sarah and Susan Setti and all that kind of stuff. So those things may be reasons why people were not inclined to invest their money into his school. Like, would you really want to turn over money to somebody that lies about their lifestyle? Would you really want to turn over money to someone that behaved the way Umar Johnson behaved when he reacted to Sarah and Susan Setti, acting like a straight up street thug and all that kind of stuff? Do you want somebody like that educating your children? I mean, that's a legitimate question for people to ask. And I see that Michonne's mom said, no shade, but please list what Umar Johnson has done for the community that can be measured or counted. That's a great point to raise. That can be measured or counted. I mean, the only thing he can count, like, as far as I know, is like how many speaking engagements he's had, and that's something he constantly brags about. He constantly talks about how he's the most requested Black speaker and this and that, and he talks about like how he's the Prince of Pan-Africanism, and he uses titles like Big Papa and all that. A lot of narcissistic type of stuff. But in terms of like what he's actually accomplished in terms of trying to get any laws passed, or end discriminatory policing practices, or employment practices, or anything like that, or stop voter fraud, for instance, there's nothing measurable that he can point to that I'm aware of that affects the Black community as a collective. Now, he can probably talk about like how he counseled this individual or that individual. He took somebody on a trip to Africa and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of actually fighting against white supremacy and racism, I'm not aware of these things that he can list that are measurable and that can be counted. But, if someone wants to educate me or enlighten me, feel free, let us know in the chat room or in the comments to this video. Yeah, that's a good point, Elaine Lloyd. You know, people saying, well, if you haven't done as much as Umar Johnson has done or half is what he's done, you can't criticize him. And Elaine Lloyd makes a great point. She said that's like saying that people can't talk about Donald Trump if they weren't president before. And she went on to say, we can talk about any person who proclaims to be a leader. We can discuss Umar, and we should be able to discuss that. And then Yvonne Robinson says, stop paying hookers with money for schools, period. Now, like, I don't know if that's the case, if he's doing that or not. So I can't make any statements about that. But yeah, I mean, it raises questions when somebody sees you, like, you know, engaged in those types of shenanigans. And I won't say she's a hooker or anything, but she was a stripper. And you're trying to present this positive image of black women. I mean, it's like the contradictions are just so obvious. I don't even need to spell them out. Okay, and somebody said, hold on one second. Somehow I got skipped ahead. Just bear with me a second. And I should have some, yeah, some of my moderators here. Hold on one second, y'all. One second. I got to scroll back to where I was. Somehow I skipped up. Okay, somebody said they want me to recap the allegations. And I'm going to do that real quick for those people who are just tuning in. Just bear with me a second. All right, so just to recap for those of you who don't know what's going on, Umar Johnson is under investigation, and this is an article from the Root that spells out, you know, what's going on. He received a notice of a hearing, and he posted it on his Instagram page. And this is the notice right here. This is his Instagram, and the notice is calling him to a hearing that's scheduled for January 8th. And this is the notice right here. So it's scheduled for January 8th at 9 a.m. And this is a hearing that involves his license to be a certified psychologist. So there's supposed to be a hearing. They don't tell you what the allegations are. Like, I've looked at this notice and it's just about the actual hearing, but it doesn't go into any of the allegations against him. But we know right now that that his license is in jeopardy. And I was going through the various reasons why somebody's license could be revoked. And they're spelled out in this article right here. And they also link you to the Pennsylvania Professional Psychologists Act. And that's right here. I'm not going to read through the whole act again, but this summarizes some of the points and some of the reasons why somebody's license can be revoked, including failure to demonstrate qualifications or standards for a license, making misleading, deceptive, untrue, or fraudulent representations in the practice of psychology, practicing fraud or deceit in obtaining a license to practice psychology. So that could mean, like, that maybe the license is not real, or maybe he used fraud to obtain the license. So those are some of the reasons why somebody can be have their license removed or whatever. Also, it points out displaying gross incompetence, negligence, or misconduct in carrying on the practice of psychology, submitting a false or deceptive report to the board, being convicted of a crime. Also, it says having a license to practice psychology suspended, revoked, or refused, or receiving other disciplinary action by the proper psychology licensing authority in another state. Being unable to practice psychology with reasonable skill and safety by reason of illness, drunkenness, excessive use of drugs, narcotics, chemicals, or any other type of material, or as a result of any mental or physical condition, violating a lawful regulation, knowingly aiding, assisting, procuring, or advising any unlicensed person to practice psychology, committing immoral or unprofessional conduct, soliciting any engagement to perform professional services by any direct, in-person, or uninvited soliciting through the use of coercion, duress, compulsion, intimidation, threats, overreaching, or harassing conduct, failing to perform any statutory obligation placed upon a licensed psychologist, intentionally submitting to a third-party payer a claim for a service or treatment that was not actually provided to a client, failing to maintain professional records in accordance with the regulations prescribed by the board. Also, like in addition to receiving this notice from the State Board of Psychology in Pennsylvania, he's also received a notice from GoFundMe. And let me just scroll to that notice from GoFundMe. Yeah, here's the notice. And they basically say that we have not received a response from you regarding our last message. Please advise, please address the following within 48 hours to avoid removal of your account. And it goes on to talk about how this is not an attack. They just want to make sure that the funds are being used and raised in line with the purpose of your particular campaign. And it goes on to say, our team is here to work with you to prove the validity of your campaign, and your cooperation is appreciated. Please note that GoFundMe may request evidence from you if we feel that it is needed to ensure that your campaign is in line with our terms. And as far as I can tell, he hasn't responded to that notice from GoFundMe. If he has, he hasn't posted it on his Facebook page. And anybody can go to his Facebook page and see this. So that's a summary of like the allegations against him. So I'll stop sharing my screen and go back to your comments. And Yvonne Robinson said this has been brewing for 2 years. She says, what license? He claims that he has a psychology license, a doctorate, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I see the prolific buyer said, how can someone be totally transparent in these types of undertakings? Just by publicly, and somebody mentioned that he posted what bank he has saved the funds in and how much is in there, and he claims that he hasn't used any of the funds. But, just providing information, like telling people exactly how much has been raised, exactly when you plan to use the funds, how much funds are still there, let people know like if any of the funds have been taken out and for what reason. That's what transparency looks like, and that's what we should expect. And we shouldn't expect somebody to go on some rant or tirade anytime somebody asks them about that information. They should be eager and prompt in providing that information to the public when they ask for that information. And Ron Hall says this. He said, what is certain is that he's an articulate, educated, and visionary man speaking on Black issues. And nobody disputes that. I mean, he's one of the best orators that I've heard in a while. He's a great speaker. He does provide a lot of information. Some of it I agree with, others points I don't agree with. But yeah, he's great at doing those things. Nobody's even disputing that. That's not, a point that's up for argument or debate right now. We're just talking about like this hearing is set. We're talking about his GoFundMe account possibly being removed, and just his whole reaction to the situation. Okay, I see someone said that Umar Johnson is exhausted. He's been attacked for years now. I believe that this is the last straw for him. Anybody would give up. No, anybody wouldn't give up. I mean, if you look at the leaders that a lot of us respect, they've come under intense pressure. I mean, if you look at a Martin Luther King, you know how he was persecuted. I mean, how this man was physically attacked, he was beaten, he was stabbed and all that kind of stuff. He went through all kinds of hell. He was arrested, jailed, and eventually he was assassinated. But yet you have somebody that's going to give up because they received some court notice. Somebody's going to give up because some website decides to suspend their account. That's not what real leadership looks like. I mean, the Black Panthers, they were shot and killed by the police. They were arrested, and some of them are still in jail today because of their beliefs. They didn't just surrender. They didn't just give up. You have Black Panthers like Assata Shakur, who can't even come back to the United States, who had to flee the United States. Those people knew what sacrifice looked like. Brother Malcolm X, under attack from within and without. He was under attack by the FBI, under attack in the media, under attack eventually by members of the organization that he helped build. But he didn't surrender. You had Harriet Tubman risking her very life to free her people. She didn't give up. She didn't call it quits. So when people quit because of some trifling notice that they received from a court or something like that, or from some administrative board, or because some website is saying that they're going to shut them down, if they quit over that, that's not real leadership. That's not what strength looks like. That's not what strong Black leadership looks like. Now, if somebody's in something for the money or for the hustle, then I could see them bowing out. I could see them saying, well, my money's in jeopardy. This is not worth my time or my energy, so I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do something else, man. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Yeah, I could see that if somebody's not sincere, if they're not committed. But when you have a genuine love for the people, you are prepared to sacrifice for the people. You are prepared to lose everything for the people. Like a Medgar Evers, brother fighting for our basic human and civil rights in this country, had his life taken. And you mean to tell me that somebody's going to give up because they received a notice from an administrative board? That's not what Black leadership looks like. Yeah, so I want to shout out. I want to thank the sister for the donation. Once I get to your, let me try to pull up your. Shout out to Cocoa Butter for your $10 donation. I truly appreciate it. So let me finish going through your comments. And Annex says something inside of me would not allow me to donate to Umar Johnson for a lot of reasons. Don't jump on me for that. That's what she says. And Macomb says that there's been several credible people that have gone on record and stated that they could not verify his license through his school or through the agency that credentials psychologists. And yeah, I've heard about that. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the Root did issue an article saying that they verified that he had the degree that he claims to have. But some people continue to question it, and maybe that's something, again, that will be decided at that hearing, but we don't know. And that's a good point, Yvonne Robinson. She asked, why would Frederick Douglass' family come out against him? And, I think that that's a valid point because, despite him trying to make clarifications, like saying that he was related to somebody that may be Frederick Douglass' brother instead of actually being an actual descendant from Frederick Douglass, the fact of the matter is, like, the way he makes his statements, like, it implies that he's a direct descendant from Frederick Douglass, and the Frederick Douglass family has, issued statements like debunking that or discrediting that and all that kind of stuff. And that goes to that whole question of truthfulness, man. I mean, even though, like, he makes subtle statements to try to cover up that, but the bottom line is this: he suggests, or implies that he's a direct descendant from Frederick Douglass. And that goes back to this whole trustworthiness issue. It goes to this credibility issue. So if y'all could bear with me for a second, I'll be right. All right, I'm back. 1 second. Again, shout out to Cocoa Butter for your donation. I appreciate it. All right, so let me finish going through your comments. So Malia said he needs a publicist. If he did, he wouldn't be in this mess. His mouth has gotten him into a lot of trouble. He needs to get off social media and relax. Yeah, maybe things would be a little bit different if he had a publicist, if he had like somebody that handles public relations and all that kind of stuff. Maybe things would be different. Because he just seems to be like one of those people that say things off the cuff without really thinking about them. Shout out to Ron Hall for your $10 donation. I truly appreciate it. Okay, so Ron Hall said him exaggerating about his relation to them is not a crime. Yeah, it's not a crime, but it goes to credibility. Like me lying about a lot of things may not be a crime. Like me getting on here on YouTube saying I'm a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer. That may not be a crime if I'm not practicing law or anything like that. But that still goes to somebody's credibility. That goes to their trustworthiness. That goes to whether or not they are somebody that can be trusted or somebody that's saying things that are truthful. So it causes you to question whether or not they're credible. So that's the issue with that. So I see Annex said, I'm not looking for Umar to be taken down, but if he did any of those things, that's on him. Exactly. Yeah, I don't want to see anybody lose their license or lose their livelihood. I don't want to see that happen to Umar Johnson. And, frankly, when I see this situation, like, I'm not going to be one of these people that jump on the bandwagon and automatically assume that whatever the allegations are against him are true without even knowing what the allegations are. I can't do that. I'll just wait again to see what happens at the hearing and all that kind of stuff before I pass judgment. on that, because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like those people. And not to compare him to Marcus Garvey, but I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like one of those people who signed off on that letter to the FBI. Like when people sent that letter to the FBI complaining about Marcus Garvey. I don't want to go down in history as one of those kind of people. I don't want to see somebody fall. I don't want to see any black man fall. But if he has done these things that he's accused of, then he should be held accountable, though. And I hope that these allegations, I hope that they're false, man. I hope that they're false for a lot of reasons. And Yvonne Robinson said he never submitted his credentials, as far as most people know. Stomp Down said this, said pastors open up storefront churches every day. Umar couldn't open up a school in 5 years. I'll wait. Hey, I can't argue with that, man. Like, I mean, he could have opened a more modest school. Like his vision was like a boarding school and all that kind of stuff on some large campus. But if he scaled down like this grandiose vision that he has, then he could have been opened up a school. Again, like there are examples of African-centered schools in Washington D.C. That aren't like grandiose. They're not like boarding schools or anything like that. If he wanted to set up a school, he could have set up a school a long time ago. And that reminds me of a conversation that I had with like one of my friends from college, and they were basically talking about how they had some interactions with him, and they got the sense that he's not really about trying to create any kind of school, because if he was, he could have done so a long time ago. But we'll see. Only time will tell. Yeah, I see. He has posted his school credentials, like, posted where he went to school and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that comes up is like his name. Like he had a different name at one point, and now his name is Umar Johnson. So that raises some questions about, about his license and all that stuff and his degrees and stuff. But we'll see. We'll find out. Ultimately, the truth will prevail and be revealed. And I see that Ron Hall said, what credentials does anyone need to address the very complicated needs of black people under white supremacy? Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need a degree to talk about race issues. I mean, we saw that Malcolm X didn't graduate from any university. And we see that, like, even Ta-Nehisi Coates, he doesn't have a degree. He went to Howard, but he didn't graduate from Howard. He didn't receive his degree or anything like that. But he's qualified to speak on race issues. So you don't need to have a degree to speak on race issues. That's not the question. The question is whether or not you actually have the degree that you are presenting to the public that you have. So if you're saying that you have a degree and you don't have a degree, that raises questions about your credibility. So just bear with me a second. Now I see that somebody says that Umar stated that he received his license through Miller's University, but people have not been able to verify that claim since there was an Umar Johnson that didn't appear to be him, but another person. And I've heard that, like I was listening to a YouTube video today and somebody mentioned that possibility. So, and maybe that's part of this notice. Maybe that's what this hearing is all about. We'll find out. Shout out to Ghost Rider. Thanks for tuning in. I want to scroll through your comments. I don't want to keep you too long. I see that a couple of people are dropping off. And Macom said, if you're going to fork over your money to someone with no business plan, agenda, or a business team, then I have no pity on you. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, man. I mean, you should demand like a business plan. I mean, you should know like what kind of team does he have in place to set up this school and all that kind of stuff. And perhaps like he's explained some of these details, but not that I'm aware of. And Elaine Lloyd points out how other charities like the Salvation Army, Red Cross, they have to show proof and all that kind of stuff. And I see August Dream said, it's one thing to raise questions, but why are people writing letters attacking his credentials? That's something altogether different. Yeah, and I don't even know if that's taking place. Like if people are actually writing in letters attacking his credentials. So far, I haven't seen copies of these letters that people allegedly writing. Shout out to LA. Peace to you. Okay, and I see that people are saying most people that are asking are not donors. Did your family members donate or something? I mean, that's really irrelevant. Like if somebody's made a donation, that doesn't even matter at the end of the day. I mean, anybody can raise a question about anything that they feel like raising a question about. And instead of deflecting and talking about the person raising the question, people need to address the issue that's being raised. You know, I just think that that's a common deflection attack, tactic that people use to try to change the conversation. Someone said, does anyone question Dr. Phil's credentials? Does anyone question Dr. Oz's credentials? People have questioned Dr. Phil's credentials. And there's a reason why credentials get questioned. Like when there are fuzzy facts or things that aren't clear, people are going to raise questions. But when somebody can quickly show you their license or their degree and stuff like that, then it's no issue. Like nobody's questioning whether or not Boyce Watkins has a doctorate. Nobody's questioning whether Cornel West has a doctorate. So I don't think it's a question of like somebody singling out Umar Johnson just to be singling him out. There are serious questions about like whether or not he has these degrees that he claims to have. Serious questions about his license and all that kind of stuff. And perhaps, again, those questions are going to be answered at that particular hearing that's scheduled for January 8th. And that's a good point, and X. Like Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz are not collecting money from Black people, asking, for the funds to build any school or anything like that. They're not asking people to trust them with their money so that they can set up some kind of school to provide guidance to the youth. So when somebody's taking on an endeavor, that important, it's only intelligent to ask them about their credentials. That's just common sense. I mean, it's not anything wrong with asking somebody about their credentials. That's just intelligent to do. I mean, would you let anybody teach your kids or be the principal of your kid's school or anything like that? Would you not be concerned about their qualifications or their credentials? I don't know about you, but I want to know who's teaching my children. I want to know like what their qualifications are. Okay, I see that Prolific Buyers asked about the NAACP collecting money, and what have they actually done for the community, though. I mean, first of all, like, I just want to be clear, like, when I do these YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff, I'm only representing my own personal opinions. I'm not representing the opinions of anybody other than myself. But as many people know, I have ties to the NAACP, and I'm not going to go into detail. But all we have to do is look at recent history in terms of civil rights cases that the NAACP has been involved with. Whether we're talking about the voter rights cases in Texas or North Carolina, we can talk about those types of cases, voting rights cases. We can talk about criminal justice issues in terms of the NAACP being at the forefront of many demonstrations against police brutality. The NAACP has been instrumental in working with the Justice Department and lobbying for them to conduct investigations of various police departments, including the Baltimore Police Department, for the Freddie Gray case and incidents of police brutality in Ferguson. The list goes on and on. I mean, anybody can just do a Google search and they'll see measurable accomplishments of the NAACP in terms of winning cases, in terms of getting laws passed, in terms of the history of the NAACP from the days of the civil rights movement until today. So I think that is a silly question. I mean, the accomplishments of an organization like the NAACP are measurable. They're things that anybody can Google. But you can't tell me one law that Umar Johnson has helped pass. You can't tell me one investigation that he has prompted the DOJ to investigate. To get it started with or conduct. You can't point to any case that he has helped win in court or anything like that. Any kind of substantive change. You can't point to anything that he's done to create change or to actually fight against racism besides talking, besides giving a lecture. So I think to raise that question just exposes like how someone's just uninformed, how they are not in tune to what's going on. If somebody just does a simple Google search, they'll see about all the work that the NAACP has done and other civil rights organizations, for instance, have done. Whether you're talking about like Black Lives Matter or you're talking about even like the National Action Network or the Leadership Conference or the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. I mean, there are so many different groups that have done things that are measurable, that people can actually point to and say, yeah, you got this law passed, you won this case, you protested against this, and that resulted in X, Y, and Z happening. So there are plenty of things that have been accomplished. And, I see that some people are saying they don't support the NAACP, and that's fine. I mean, there are people who don't support a lot of things, don't support anything. They're not a member of any organizations. They're not doing anything at all to improve the community besides complaining, besides sitting on their ass being an armchair revolutionary and Somebody that's sitting on the sidelines, player hating, somebody sitting on the sidelines, uh, you know, just throwing shade at people instead of actually being engaged in the struggle. I could, that's all I have to say about that, man. There are plenty of good things being done by a lot of people. And, the NAACP is one of those groups that has done many things throughout history. I mean, you would still have Jim Crow if it wasn't for the NAACP. I mean, you go back to the Montgomery bus boycott and the work of Rosa Parks, a member of the NAACP. You look at all this, the whole civil rights litigation, legislation, whether we're talking about the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, all those key civil rights laws that are in place, the NAACP played a fundamental role in getting those laws passed. So, spare me with the BS about how the NAACP hasn't done anything, man. I just think a lot of times people are ungrateful, uninformed, and just plain ignorant when they bash an organization that has done many great things for the Black community. All right, so I'm going to go through some more of these comments. Shout out to B Money. He says, I agree, they're entertainment and they should market themselves as such. Yeah, I mean, if you're not actually engaged in any kind of real struggle, if your only objective is to get booked for different speaking engagements or to travel and give speeches, if that's all you're doing, then you're just an entertainer. You're just like, somebody that speaks. Back in the day when you had leaders like Malcolm X speaking, or the Black Panther Party leaders speaking, or SNCC leaders speaking, or NAACP leaders speaking, they weren't just speaking, they were organizing. They were getting people together to form chapters or branches in different parts of the country and stuff like that. And once these chapters and branches or mosques were set up, like in the case of Malcolm X, they actually did things in their community to improve the community. Whether it was fighting for civil and human rights, like in terms of the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, or building institutions in the community like the Nation of Islam, building schools and businesses and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that the model for leadership now is not a strong model, man. It's like people are more focused on like the ability of someone to entertain them instead of the ability of someone to actually produce results. Okay, so this person said if Umar Johnson had no power, I doubt that people would be discussing him. He's a powerful speaker with a unique voice. That's enough. Yeah, I mean, he has speaking power and all that kind of, I mean, nobody's disputing that. He is a relevant person. So, yeah, I mean, it's true. If he wasn't relevant, nobody would be talking about him. He does have influence. But the question is, what is he doing with that influence? How is he using that influence to actually change anything? How is he using that influence to fight racism in other types of ways besides giving a speech? That's what I want to know. So I see that LA says that changing the mentality of Blacks is important. That's the most important step. So he's done a lot. I mean, changing people's viewpoints is important, like in creating Black consciousness, that is important. I'm not going to downplay that. But more important than just talking to somebody and changing their attitude or their consciousness is changing the condition under which Black people live. Like, you could be conscious all day and night, but if you're still oppressed, your situation hasn't improved. If you're still a second-class citizen, or if you're still subjected to mass incarceration, if you're still subjected to failing schools, if you're still subjected to voter suppression, consciousness alone is not enough. If you're still living in an impoverished community with few opportunities, having consciousness alone is not enough. We need organization and we need mobilization to create change. That's the way I feel, man. Consciousness is good, but alone is not enough. And I see LA is saying black people were born to and raised to self-implode. And I don't agree with that. I mean, analyzing and criticizing somebody or holding them accountable is not self-imploding. It's about people being held accountable. It's about checks and balances and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that we're self-imploding or anything like that. We implode when we don't hold these leaders accountable. We implode when we allow people to raise funds from us without asking for anything in return, without asking for a timetable. This guy's been raising this money for years now. He's been talking about the school for years now, but there's no school in sight. 5 years from now, I wonder if there will be a school. I wonder if there was ever any real plan to have a school. So I see LA is saying that black people attack leaders more than other people. They need to get on code. And, I don't necessarily think that's true. You see white people criticizing white leaders all the time. All you have to do is turn on CNN and they're criticizing this politician and that politician, this leader of that organization and that leader of whatever organization. You see that in any community. You see that there's no sense of everyone thinking the same or being absolutely monolithic. There are debates that go on in communities all the time. There are disagreements that go on in communities all the time. I don't believe in putting on a front or a show to pretend like there's some kind of unity, putting on a fake facade of unity when there is no unity. I don't believe in allowing people to get away with taking money from people in the name of being pro-black and in the name of unity. So I don't think that unity should be a basis to silence people and to not hold people accountable. So I'm not one to just fall in line and get into code and all that, this and that, and avoid talking about issues. I think that when people do that, that's just another form of brainwashing and mind control. It's another way of controlling people's behavior so they don't criticize and call out the BS. Yeah, I don't buy that whole argument that if you didn't donate, you can't speak on it. That's silly. People that say that same thing have no problem getting on here criticizing the pastors that's trifling, that take money from congregations and stuff like that, even though they didn't donate any money to Creflo Dollar. For instance, people like myself, we did videos about Creflo Dollar begging his congregation for millions of dollars so that he could buy a jet. A lot of people criticized him for that. We didn't have to give money to Creflo Dollar to raise that issue. We don't have to be a member of these churches and all that kind of stuff to raise issues about foul behavior and hypocrisy and swindling and pimping of the congregation. So, again, that's just another one of those tactics to shut people down and shut people up. And I just don't buy that, man. I just don't go along with that. Okay, and I see that Ron Hall says Umar Johnson has made many mistakes that have gotten him to this point, but he still has a place in bringing a unique message and perspective to the Black community. Yeah, I mean, I don't have. I mean, he can talk about anything he wants to, and nobody's denying that he has a, that he's a great speaker or he has points to make. I'm not denying that. That's not the issue. And I see that B Money is saying that Jalen Rose built a school. Umar should have teamed up with a group that could make it happen. He can't do it alone. Yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, you have a lot of people that created schools. You got Oprah Winfrey. You got what's his name? LeBron James. I mentioned earlier. So it can happen. I mean, it can happen. It's just about like him scaling back that vision that he has in terms of it being a private, boarding school. I mean, and my question is, what average person in the Black community can even afford to have their kid go to a private boarding school? I don't know how much the tuition is supposed to be or any of that stuff. Storm, Storm Down said you'll be better off donating to Tommy Sotomayor. I don't know about that. I can't co-sign that, man. Tommy Sotomayor talked about some film that he was supposed to be doing. Years like back, I think it was back around the time when I first got into YouTube and started checking out the Black sector of YouTube. I mean, and that was years. That was at least, I think that was at least 3 or even 4 years ago. He was talking about raising funds for a fatherless America, and here we are, all these years later. There is no film in sight. And, he swindled all those people out of their money, and these fools continue to support him. That's what a charlatan looks like, man. And that just shows you how blind and deaf and dumb a lot of people are to continue to support a charlatan who, for the most part, has acknowledged that he just swindled those people out of their money. So I can't co-sign that, man. And then Tommy Sotomayor represents the worst of the worst, man, in terms of his misogyny, in terms of his coonery and buffoonery, co-signing police brutality, talking about we need an army of George Zimmermans, talking about where's Darren Wilson when you need him. Oh hell no, man! I can't co-sign that message, man. Even though I said all this stuff, I would rather donate to a Umar Johnson over a Tommy Sotomayor any day of the week. But anyway, both of them, I wouldn't recommend donations to. I would need more of a business plan for Umar Johnson. I would need some of these controversies to be cleared up before I would donate. I need to see what happens with this hearing and all that stuff. Just bear with me. I'm going to go through these last comments. LA said, why would Umar Johnson lie about a school? This is why I don't I don't F with niggas anymore. This is all I'll say about that, man. I mean, if you're real cynical, you could say that he may have, and I don't know if it's a lie or not, but in terms of answering your question, somebody could lie about a school just so they can raise money, so they could raise thousands of dollars. That's one reason why somebody would lie about a school. What better way to get people to give you money if you're talking about building a Black school for Black boys and all this and that? That's one motivation for somebody lying. And, just asking for basic information about this fundraising effort is not anything that should cause somebody to say, well, I can't deal with Black people anymore. I mean, Don't you know, like if you go on any website for any charity, like a lot of their information is publicly available. It tells you how much they raised, when they raised it, exactly how the funds are being used. There's accountability. You can go to websites and see all the information about various charities and how they're using funds. So asking for that information is nothing extraordinary. It's nothing overly burdensome or anything like that. It's just common sense. It's intelligent to ask for that information. And only a fool would give their money to somebody without knowing about a business plan, without having basic information about that donation and how it's being used and where it's going and how much funds have been raised and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I see somebody mention Diddy starting a school. And if I'm not mistaken, he did start a charter school already. And I think it's in Harlem, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have someone who set up a Harlem, something else in Harlem, a young man. I don't know if it's a school or a program, but it's not that difficult for somebody to set up a school, especially when they have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars like Umar Johnson has raised. There's no reason why it should be taking him this long to create this school. And, frankly, I hope that he proves a lot of us wrong. I hope that he sets up this school, gets it up and running and all that kind of stuff. And I hope that he does prevail in this case, but we'll see. I hope for the sake of all the black people that put their time and their money and energy behind him, I hope that nothing comes of this hearing, and I hope that he fulfills the promises that he made to the people. Because if he doesn't, that'll be another example of a failed black leader. That'll be another example of a charlatan. But we'll see how it turns out. I see that Stomp Down said how much of his personal funds did he donate. Okay, I see that LA said you're a hip hop fan and you speak highly of people like Nas, but you trash Umar Johnson, and he's going to address that on his show. Um, First of all, a rapper like a Nas or any other rapper, they're not professing to be the prince of Pan-Africanism. They're not professing to be the most requested speaker. They're not professing to be some kind of intellectual here to liberate black people and unite black people. They're not on here professing to create some kind of school. So to compare a Nas to a Umar Johnson is like comparing apples to oranges. To compare like holding him accountable versus holding a rapper accountable is again like comparing apples to oranges. And in terms of holding these rappers accountable, I've done countless videos talking about negativity in hip hop music, talking about the violence, the drugs, and the misogyny and all that kind of stuff. I've talked about that time and time again. And even for an artist like Nas, like, there's some songs that I can't co-sign or whatever, that I don't agree with the message of them, but he does have a lot of positive songs that are enlightening, but he also has songs just talking about life in general, life in the hood and all that kind of stuff, without necessarily glorifying violence and all that kind of stuff. But I just think that that's a deflection, man. It's like people want you to get off track and talk about anything other than the subject at hand. The subject at hand is that a administrative board in Pennsylvania has issued a notice for a hearing to determine whether or not Umar Johnson's license will be revoked. And the questions are, why would they issue such a notice if it had no merit? And let's see what kind of evidence is being presented. What kind of evidence will be produced at this hearing? Those are the questions on the table, man, not all this side talk and these deflections and all that kind of stuff. Nas is not the subject of this video. The subject of the video is not all this other stuff. It's Umar Johnson. It's his GoFundMe possibly being removed. And the question is, why are they threatening to remove it? Like, and nobody wants to deal with that question. A website like GoFundMe doesn't just issue some statement threatening to take down somebody's account without any kind of reason. And we have to ask ourselves, why are they issuing that statement? And better yet, why hasn't Umar Johnson responded to the notice that he received from GoFundMe? That's the question. Not all these deflections. Shout out to Robert J. Peace to you. Just gonna scroll through a few more of these comments before I close out. So I see LA said that people are hating the same way they took down his PayPal with lies. Yeah, I heard you mention people taking down your PayPal, but I'm wondering, like, how were they able to do that, man? How are they able to take down your PayPal and stuff? Yeah, I didn't see Boyce Watkins' video. You call him Boyce Watkins. Yeah, I didn't see his video, LA. So I don't know what he had to say, but I know he was probably, I mean, for lack of a better word, hating on Umar because they've had back and forths and all that kind of stuff a couple of years ago or a year ago. So I'm sure he had a lot of stuff to say. But I mean, people got to get out of this mode where they feel like they have to defend Umar Johnson without bringing actual facts and receipts, man. It's like, why do people have this impulsive or, you know, natural desire to just blindly defend him without coming with facts and information? You know, I raised several questions in this stream, and I don't. So far, I haven't seen any answers to those questions, man. But I would like to know, like, how were people able to take down your PayPal? Like, how could somebody just do that? Like, what would be the grounds for them taking down your PayPal? And I wonder how many accounts this guy has. All right. Yeah, I see that LA is saying, well, go listen to Neely Fuller. When black men do anything constructive, he'll be attacked by Negroes and white supremacists. Yeah, I don't question that. Like when somebody's like outspoken and they stand up, like all those people I mentioned, like a Malcolm X or even a Martin Luther King or Huey P. Newton and stuff like that, they will be attacked. And understanding that, if somebody understands that history and stuff like that, they would make sure that they were on point. You know, they would make sure that they could withstand any such attacks. They would make sure that their business affairs were in order so that somebody could not attack them. Um, all right, this has been going on kind of long, so let me try to go through these comments real quick. And I see that somebody in the comment in the chat room mentioned that Creflo Dollar is disgusting. He strangled and repeatedly punched his 15-year-old daughter in the face for sassing him. Yeah, I heard about that, man. That's crazy, man. And I see that, you know, prolific buyer said W.E.B. Du Bois tried to destroy Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington's movements. Booker T. Washington, first of all, was, I mean, I did a video where I said Booker T. Washington was a coon. And y'all could go watch that video if you want to know, like, my thoughts about Booker T. Washington. I mean, I could go on and on, but I won't. That's going to take me off topic. But y'all could just go back and look that video up. Just search for Booker T. Washington as a coon, and you'll see what I think about him. And, you know, the disputes between Du Bois and Garvey were unfortunate. You know, both of them were Pan-Africanists. Both of them contributed greatly to our struggle. And it's a shame that they were at odds with each other, just like it's a shame that Malcolm and Martin were at odds with each other. They would have accomplished so much if they worked together instead of apart. Yeah, for these people that want to defend Umar Johnson, I mean, the question again is like, what has he done that's measurable? I challenge people to answer that question. Storm Down said, it's funny. Umar missed his calling. He should have been a crooked black pastor. That's funny. No, man, he shouldn't be. I mean, that's a funny comment, but I don't think he should have been a crooked black pastor. I think we got enough of those. And I see somebody's bringing up Margaret Sanger and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to address that. I've talked about that in prior videos. And August Dream says this has gone beyond asking legitimate questions. This seems to be more of a witch hunt. How so? Exactly, B Money. They're not organizing their followers to do anything of substance. Exactly. Not organizing any protests, not organizing any kind of lobbying efforts, not organizing even a petition drive, not organizing a thing. And like even on my channel, like I have done videos where I encourage people to contact their Congress people for different issues and stuff like that. I've done petition drives on here. I've supported different protests and stuff like that and different marches on here. So in a little way, I've done something on here. Like I've done some things that are like productive, you know, besides just talking. And I plan to do more of that on this channel. B Money said it's all feel-good speeches and rhetoric. Exactly, man. And as Annex says, we have not convicted Umar. We've just asked questions. What's wrong with that? Exactly. Hell, I said, ignorance and intellectuality cannot occupy the same space. I'm going live. Yeah, so y'all can check him out. I'll check out the playback. And I'll probably check him out like after I'm done going through your comments. Again, I agree, Cocoa Butter. People have a right to question Umar when it comes to their dollars. Strange Fruit said, "Where is fatherless America?" Exactly. I mean, that guy Tommy was talking about doing that film like years ago. It's nowhere in sight, despite raising all that money. Here we are all those years later, and there is no film, as many people predicted. Debbie Lee said maybe if he was more transparent in the beginning, he would have gotten more support, especially for education. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Like somebody said, a lot of athletes and entertainers have white wives, so they're not going to support someone that says no to interracial unions. Yeah, I mean, that may be one of the reasons why a lot of people don't support him. But there are plenty of athletes that do have black spouses that could have supported him, like, like LeBron James and a lot of people. Man, I could go on and on with names. Somebody said troll alert. Oh, I see. My moderators are taking people out. Good. Oh, you do counseling, Robert? I didn't know that. Oh, True Royal said she wants to buy a picture. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I have a drawing. I have an art YouTube channel where I feature my drawings and paintings. I plan to do a painting soon. But yeah, I'll inbox you, True Royal, if you're really interested in buying something, and give you some details. All those drawings are for sale. Doug said he saw a rough draft of Fatherless America. Well, where's the final product, man? It's been all these years later, man. Tony Bryan said it's good to question Umar on what he's done. According to him, he still got the money, but we'll see when the audit goes down. Yep, we'll all find out. Yeah, I could definitely sell you that Jimi Hendrix True Royal. I'll inbox you. It'll probably be in the morning because I'm about to close this out and then call it a night. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Um, let's see. Robert J. Powell said, "Oh, I don't do counseling." Oh, let me see. Let me look back at your comment before I close out. Maybe I misread it. My haste. Oh, Annex said I'm an excellent artist. Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, you said you were saying that Umar Johnson has done counseling pro bono. And I was trying to find out what he's done besides public speeches. All right, y'all. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. Peace and blessings to each and every one of you. I want to shout out those people who made donations. I truly appreciate it. Shout out to Cocoa Butter. Shout out to Ron Hall. I truly appreciate you for making donations to this channel. I'm going to use your donations to improve the quality of this channel. I want to try to get some cameras and stuff like that. I want to get green screens as well. So gradually, I'm going to try to build up this channel. I want to get more subscribers and improve the quality of it. But peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting my channel. Peace.